Yes, Honorable Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we'll move on to item 14, where we'll conclude the debate on the second reading of the Right to Information Bill. It started and it just left the conclusion of debate. Right to Information Bill.
I believe it's for further debate. Honorable Majority Leader, I believe it's for further debate. Very well. Honorable members, item number 14 on the order paper. It's a motion, the Right to Information Bill 2013. The motion has been moved, it has been seconded, and the House has already started considering it. We need to take a few more contributions before we put the question. So, honorable members, the floor is open. Yes, honorable member for Subin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a very important bill, and it's been in this House for quite a long time. And I believe that this is the time for us to pass it. It is important, first, because it is the constitutional right of a citizen to know. And secondly, I think for the purposes of transparency and openness in government, it is important that, subject to national security concerns, it is important that the people of our country get to know what their officials are doing. There are so many things that we mark as secrets, but which probably ought to be in the public domain. What, Mr. Speaker, I wish to add is that we should look at all those areas where there are restrictions.
Let's have some order in the House. Let's have some order. Yes, honorable member.
I think we should probably look at all those areas where there are restrictions, making it impossible for people to access the information that they want. And I think this is the area that we need to look at carefully, so that we don't block the opportunities for people to get to know and to have access to official documents for whatever purposes that they may want to use these documents. So I will urge the House to support this bill, first because it is our right, and secondly because it will promote transparency in our governance systems. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Yes, Honorable Deputy Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, by the Constitution, access to information should be free. But, Mr. Speaker, I look at the report of the committee, and one issue that has come out is the issue of a situation where the applicant is refused access and he has to appeal to the Supreme Court for redress. Mr. Speaker, my concern here is that an appeal to the Supreme Court, even though it's a right to any individual to so access, the issue of the Supreme Court, in my view, is so high to the extent that we from the villages who may not be able to go to the Supreme Court will be denied that access to access information. Mr. Speaker, I can't imagine anybody from my village who applies for a report or information and he refuses access will see his way going as far as the Supreme Court. Mr. Speaker, I would suggest that in a situation like this, we have the courts in our various districts which can also give us access. And in this wise, I would think that instead of the Supreme Court, the law should be such that one can apply to a district court or even a high court at the regional level for his right to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, Supreme Court is the highest court of the land, and not many people, in my view, will be ready, will be willing, or will be free to apply to such a body. For people who are not akin to the cities will not feel fine and free to go to the Supreme Court. A lower court, for that matter, in my view, will be appropriate.
At the first instance. The first instance is the lower court.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Even if the issue is that you have the access to the court, which can grant you access to information, the first instance, in my view, should go to the lower court, which is in our districts available for us to access. Mr. Speaker, one issue is payment of fees. Payment of fees. So far as access to information should be free, as far as possible, access should be free. The issue of payment of fees will drive away most of us, most people who may not be in a position to pay fees. Mr. Speaker, that is one issue which I want to bring to the fore for when the issue comes to be considered. The issue of fees or payment of fees should be looked at seriously. Mr. Speaker, yes, this law is good. It is good for us to have a system where you seek information, there should not be any hindrance towards accessing that information. But when such impediments like going to court or paying fees, which may not be within your pocket, are introduced, we may be denied access. Mr. Speaker, I think that we should do as far as possible to pass this law for people, for us all, to access information. Mr. Speaker, with this, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Honourable members, any more contributions? Before I come to the leadership. Yes, honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, it is obvious that the Right to Information Bill is a very important one, and it's one that has been with us for a long time, and the Ghanaian people have been yearning that this law will come into effect such that government information can be readily available to the Ghanaian public as at when they need it. Mr. Speaker, in supporting this bill, I want to reiterate a very salient point that was mentioned earlier by earlier contributors. That is the fact that we must not restrict this only to the government entities. But then the private entities that does business with government is also very critical, very important. And there are instances where they hold very vital information which the people would need. And the reason for which I think that it will be pertinent to expand the scope, as has been stated aptly by the report of the committee. Mr. Speaker, this bill, when passed into law, obviously will bring about transparency. It will also lessen corruption because clearly you will be public officers who will have information will be very careful, they will not be able to hold on to information as is the case today, because that in itself will minimize the tendency of speculation by especially the media and all. So I think that this bill is a very good one, and I will urge this House to actually pass it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you very much. Honourable members. Yes, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just a few words to thank the committee and particularly civil society for the interest in this bill and also for the support the coalition on the right to information gave to the committee. The coalition did a very good research work, and together with the committee, a lot of time was taken to deal with all the knotty issues, many of which had been raised by members on the floor of the House. Mr. Speaker, the journey has been very long and tortuous. Well, we started this journey in 1999, trying to craft a right to information bill, which used to be called Freedom of Information Bill. Mr. Speaker, I listened to many of my colleagues raise caution on some of the provisions, but I want to allay their fears that a lot of work has gone into it, a lot of discussions globally, but more importantly, by the AU, the African Union, led by our presidents, with the various technical people, came out with a model draft law, which is guiding many African countries in the process of legislating in this area of our life. Mr. Speaker, some of us have been fortunate to be part of the process since 1999. But there are a few basic principles underpinning this bill. One is that almost all the information generated by the public bodies, by government, have already been paid for by the people. The officers themselves are paid. The cost of the information, the operations, they are all paid for by the people through taxation. Mr. Speaker, the other principle is that the freedom of information is a fundamental human right, and in fact is said to be the touchstone to all freedoms, which all of us, led by the United Nations, consecrated. And so, Mr. Speaker, nothing should be a fetter to the enjoyment of this fundamental human rights. Balancing that against issues of national security, what the principle states is that the public interest should always be the guiding principle. And so we know that that has tremendous influence on democracy and development. And that is why in 1993, the Commonwealth adopted the Commonwealth Freedom of Information Principles, which clearly underlines this basic principle. Mr. Speaker, the AU in 2002 also adopted the Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression in Africa. And it is that declaration that guided the AU to come out with the draft model law for all our African countries. In fact, Liberia has passed, Nigeria has passed, many countries, India and the rest. And Tanzania last year passed their Right to Information Bill, but they detected defects, and they have been called upon to review and revise it to conform to the principles stated in the AU model law. And so this year, Tanzania is amending the law they passed in 2014. So, Mr. Speaker, all these were considered by the committee, and as I said, guided by the coalition of the NGOs on the right to information. And happily, we had a lot of astute lawyers who were there to assist the committee. But, Mr. Speaker, the thorny issues are issues of exemptions, issues of timelines, then issues of appeals and review, as my deputy just mentioned, and then also the issue of payment. But the principle of payment is limited to reproduction of the information, the cost of reproduction. If you just go for the information, you'll be given. But if you are asking for copies to be made, then you should be called upon to take up the cost. Mr. Speaker, you realize we departed from the initial policy thrust of the bill of leaving it in the hands of ministers, because ministers are part of government. And the issue of impartiality have always been raised. And therefore, the principle is for us to establish an independent organization with cost implications. But when you weigh the cost as against the benefits, we agree and admit that the benefits outweigh the cost. And so that is why in the committee's report, we have recommended the establishment of a commission. And this has been accepted by the AU, and that is what is being done by all the other countries that are passing the new bill on right to information. And therefore, we are on the correct path, Mr. Speaker, and I want my colleagues to accept the proposals of the committee. And so the bill has been completely reviewed, and that is why we have so many amendments. And it's so important that we cannot handle it this meeting. And we are proposing that the next meeting, considerable time will be given to this bill, and for this time, at least the third time, the Parliament of Ghana should be able to pass this bill. As with this, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Minority Leader. Any contribution? No. All right. Honourable members, the motion has been moved and seconded, and the House has considered it. It is time for me to put the question. Honourable members, as many as are in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. As many as are against, say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried.
For the implementation of the constitutional right to information held by a government agency, subject to the exemptions that are necessary and consistent with the protection of public interest in a democratic society, to foster a culture of transparency and accountability in public affairs, and to provide for related matters.
Honourable members, the Right to Information Bill 2013 duly read a second time.